my name's Emma. Today we're going to talk about how activism is an active choice. And that's what we talk about here on this channel. How can we make better choices and decisions by understanding the consequences that come from making those choices and decisions? Activism is an active choice that we can choose to make or choose not to make. And nobody should ever feel forced into making a certain decision because they fall into a certain group and somebody expects them to tell them a perspective or a story or to fill in the gaps of where their information is lacking. Too much information exists in the world. There's too many activists who are willing to share this information for us to ever feel like we need to directly talk to somebody who we think needs to tell us some kind of information. If somebody asks you a question, or if you ask somebody a question, they do not owe you a response. They do not owe you a story. They do not owe you resources. They owe you nothing. They could say, I'm not interested in talking about that. Let's talk about something else. And then you can respectively choose to talk about something else. And that's really the thing. Activism is deep-rooted with respect and understanding and acceptance of where people are, where people stand. And that is really it. I'm going to talk about a few different things that are very important if you decide to become an activist. The first one is that if you're an activist, you need to be willing to learn. You need to be willing to learn about different perspectives and opinions about what you are becoming an activist for. You need to understand how your activism, whether it be in veganism or human rights, how that connects to many other movements, feminism, racism, and that really, no matter where you decide to become an activist, there's always more to learn and to understand the connections between all these different things. But it's not just about learning about those fun things, it's also learning about how to talk to people, how to interact with people, how to not be upset when somebody says certain things to you. And the best way to do that is to continue to learn perspectives and to engage with these perspectives when you are on your own time, watching videos about people who have completely different views on what you're doing, and to see if you can come up with a way to start a conversation with that person. And if this sounds like a lot of work, it's because it is. If you decide to become an activist, you are deciding that you are going to be a lifelong learner about the world and about the different perspectives and about what's going on, and learning and adjusting as you learn. And that's another big thing, is dealing with negative comments and dealing with negativity when it comes to certain movements, and counteracting that when people falsely take on an activist role because they decided to make a better choice and people are now forcing them into being an activist, and how we counteract that. A lot of the times, being an activist is fun. If somebody is like, oh, why are you vegan? And a lot of times I do get asked that question, and now I've just learned that it's not very helpful if I go into the full range of why I'm vegan, but to really see why they asked that question, to see where they stand and what they want to learn about it. What are they trying to get out of asking that question, so that we can project the question into something that's more useful for them. Activism is very much an act of service of trying to change the world and trying to be that active participant in changing what is happening and changing viewpoints and changing understanding, changing perspectives. And because of that, it is a huge responsibility and accountability. When we have conversations with people, oftentimes we are their first experience in person or online, wherever platform you're on, to talk about this. And the way that we approach responding to comments, to what people are saying, is going to be dictating how people view or have an impression of that movement or of that entirety of that movement. And it's a big responsibility. And of course, we all make mistakes and we learn from talking to people. So the most important part is to keep an open mind, to understand your own perspective, that you didn't know everything that you know now. It took me personally 10 years to understand veganism and activism to the extent that I do now, and I know I have a lot more to learn, a lot more perspectives to engage with and to talk in person with, and I'm really excited about that, to learn and to continue to have conversations with people and to come up with different ways to think about the thing that I am so passionate about. When I learn different ways to talk about veganism, it excites me. It's not a burden. And that's really the difference. Is if you decide to be an activist, you're doing it because you like doing it. You're doing it because you like talking to people. You like talking about different perspectives. You like talking about different ways to look at the world. And that's a really important part, because you will be engaging with people who think completely opposite of you. And if that doesn't excite you to want to learn more, to have that conversation with someone, it's really difficult to be an activist that is actively changing the world in a positive way if you are coming off angry or upset or offended. And that will happen. People will say offensive things, but it's your reaction to it that matters the most, which is why there's so much difficulty when we're forcing people to take on the activist role, that they didn't choose to do it, because of the responsibility that comes with it. You know, if you're watching somebody on YouTube or something like that, and they decide to buy sustainable fashion and all of that, we can't expect that person to suddenly be an activist and fully understand the extent to why fast fashion or why slow fashion is this versus that. Most of the time, people are just making choices that they think are the best for them in that moment. And if we expect them to fully understand the extent of all the consequences of their choices, that's also unfair and will lead people away from being active participants in trying to understand the world around them. And we shouldn't be doing that. If somebody is doing something and it's offensive or it's harmful, we can state those feelings, and oftentimes those people will try to not do that. We're all people. We don't want to hurt others. Most of the time we don't want to be hurting people. So if you calmly explain, like, oh, like, there's this reason or this, then that person can be more receptive. Whereas if they're not, whether regardless of whether they're an activist or not, we need to be kinder to people. If we are expecting people to be perfect all the time, that's not kindness. That is an expectation that they cannot achieve. Even if you have been vegan for 50 years and you live off the land, we all produce waste. We all produce things that are harmful, and that's okay. The point is that we're all making choices in the areas that we can make choices, and then when we can do that and we're comfortable with it, we then can move on to other areas. And every step that we can take in the direction towards creating a more accessible, more accepting world, a world where less people are being harmed and exploited, that's really the goal. And there's so many different places that you can make those steps. And there's not just one that is more important than another. It is not just individual choices, it's not just government choices. We did not get to the situation that we are in the world through one thing. It is a combination of things. And to be an activist, we need to be actively learning about how all of these different things are connected and how they all got us to where we are in this moment. And that is really the whole goal of activism. And the last part is, this is something that you will continue to learn about all the time, and to be able to adjust. If there's concerns about what you're saying or words, you need to be able to apologize, to say, I made a mistake, and then move on, and then adjust accordingly. And that's it. We don't need to feel overly burdened by the disappointment of we messed up. We all mess up, we all make mistakes. And if we are choosing to realign, to readjust, to move forward in a positive direction, and to be even more inclusive now, to be more accessible, that is really the goal. And that is how we should take criticism, if there is any, and to see, okay, well, this wasn't a great way to reach this person. Now I've learned something. Now I can apply that to my activism moving forward. And if we aren't willing to see situations where people comment or are trying to be offensive, or if we don't see it as an opportunity to learn, which is the first thing, right? We need to always be learning. It makes it really difficult to continue to grow your understanding about the world. And that's really what we're trying to do. And we're trying to engage as many people as we can to do that as well. That's really what activism is all about. we have to continue to learn about the world if we want to have others continue to learn about the world and therefore make better choices by understanding those consequences, because they've learned about how other people have made choices and the consequences that have come out of those, or the choices we've continued to make and the consequences that have come out of that. And everything that is currently happening in the world were choices that somebody made that got us here. And that's really what we're trying to share with people is choices got us here, choices will get us away from here if we choose that. It's all about choice. Activism is a choice. Making better decisions is a choice. We all have choices to be made all the time, and they're not always easy. And you'll never really know every single consequence that comes out of these choices. But if you're doing the best that you can with the information that you currently know and you're seeking to learn more information, it's really the goal about life, isn't it? We're always learning, we're always changing, and if we're applying things in a positive manner, that's really all that matters. And if we can do that with kindness and gratitude and acceptance that we all have different perspectives and that they're all valid, then it changes how we approach things. So, I hope you got something out of this today. Be kind to people, be honest, be aware, and the choices that you make will easily become more understanding of their consequences. So I hope to see you soon, but until then, have an amazing day.